You know, a good 15 years ago, superhero content wasn't as center-focused and market-saturating as it is right now. At the turn of the century, the world was beginning to turn away from the ever more campy superhero movies that were more toy advertisements than cinematic pieces.
You to take a sandwich with you, sir?
I'll get drive-through.
It's dynamic $2 dinner deal.
And that's just in movies. The games adjacent to these movies and franchises in general had it worse. Way worse. They were cheap cash grabs made to milk the release of a movie or a new season to some animated series. So how is it that now, in 2023, a game about Spider-Man is really well made when 20 years ago it would have been like Yandere Dev tier? What set the example that superhero games can be just as good as regular games? Well, it's the game we're talking about today, Batman Arkham Asylum. And now, I think we should learn why this game won the GOTY, why it got raving reviews, and why it made you feel like Batman. But before that, we need to learn why it exists in the first place. In 2006, a Batman Begins tie-in game was released. It's alright, it's moderately good. It even had some features that Asylum would take from it. Well, they also wanted a tie-in game to release along with The Dark Knight, but the studio couldn't really deliver, so they ended up closing. And they passed the job to a young studio called Rocksteady, who were coming off the release of their only pre-Batman game, Urban Chaos: Riot Response. A tense kind of mid-game that's about saving people from riots, I guess. Anyways, Rocksteady got the Batman license, and since the Dark Knight movie had already come out by then, they were just told to just make a Batman game. And they made their own verse, which is loosely based off the really well-regarded animated series. Hell, it even has the same voice actors. The premise of the game is very simple. You return Joker to the asylum after he committed some comic mischief at Town Hall, but soon enough you realize it was all part of his plan. It's been rigged from the start, and now he runs the island. And your goal is to defeat him. Now, this game, 14 years later, still feels modern. It doesn't have that clunky feeling people whine about when playing something like Deus Ex or the original System Shock. It's as smooth and responsive as it gets. Not even just the controls, the graphics are still somehow really good looking. This game truly has aged like fine wine. And a main drawing for this game is the legendary and crazy influential free-flow combat system, which, fun fact, actually started as a rhythm minigame, which means it was just Guitar Hero but with violence. But it ended up evolving into a unique mechanic where you've got a button assigned to attacks, one assigned to counter-attacking, and even things like various non-lethal takedowns and even some combat rolls. This free-flow style is at its most primitive here in Asylum, with a very low number of animations in comparison to the games that would follow this one, which would go on to improve on and even perfect the combat system. Of course, this would all return to nothing, as Gotham Knights threw the mechanic in the trash and came up with the single, most insufferably mid alternative that just looks like a bunch of asset flips animation jumbled together. Another gameplay element I really want to shine a light on is the stealth, or as the game calls it, Predator segment. In these sections, you unclench your fist and instead decide to hide in the shadows. Study the room and keep your eyes peeled for any opening to strike and silently take down the thugs patrolling the area. Oh yeah, and how could I forget about the detective vision? Well, it's a tool that was definitely not taken from a Metroid game, but it works as Batman's own wall hack. You can use it to scan a room, find the enemies in it, and you also use it to, like, do detective stuff sometimes, like scanning cigars. Another thing this game has, apart from the main story mode, is the challenge map section, where you put in a certain map of the campaign with enemies and you're given points for successful fluid combos. Your objective is no longer pursuing the bad guys and foiling their plans, no. Your objective now is kicking the most ass to get the highest position in the scoreboard. There are combat challenges and there are predators challenges. There are even hard versions of already existing challenges which, of course, ramp up the difficulty. Like for example, in the normal version of this map there are some basic enemies and maybe some guys with bats and pipes. But in the hard version, you've got multiple special enemies and even a mini-boss in the form of Victor Zsasz. In the PS3 version, which I've got by the way, there's some exclusive extra content, some extra bonus maps, an armor batsuit which sadly is challenge mode exclusive, and the chance to play as the Joker, also just in challenge mode. He has some fun gadgets like chattering teeth, crazy glasses, and a gun. Just a regular handgun. And he also occasionally hits the gritty after violently kicking people's balls. Classic Joker. And speaking about the Joker, yes, he does indeed appear in the game. Of course, being a Batman game and all, we're bound to see some of his rogues gallery. This game features the Joker, who's pretty much every internet tough guy. He shit talks and taunts you all throughout the game.
Hey, Babs! I know you can hear me. I've got a little something for you to listen to.
Online, we call that trolling.
Up until you actually meet him face to face. Then he's just a clown.
Oh, you can say that over the phone, Batman, but if I had you here, I'd pound you to a pulp. Start pounding, Joker.
Right alongside the Joker we've got, of course, Harley, who in this game isn't a pretty attractive... I take it back.
Pretty hot, huh?
You do beat her shit in her boss fight though. Another notable baddie we face off against is the Riddler. We don't beat with a standard brawl or anything, we beat him at his own game. There are 200-ish trophies scattered along the island we must find, along with a lot of riddles we have to solve. Here's where some of those Metroidvania elements come in, because you'll be in the right place, but you won't have the correct gadget unlocked yet. You'll have to go back to some of these areas post-game. And let me tell you, because we're gonna talk about this mechanic in the rest of the saga later on. This is the only game where the Riddler challenges are actually fun. Take that as you will. There are other villains who appear in their own boss fights, like Bane, who is a reskin Titan battle, Poison Ivy, who has a Titan-infused 40-meter tall killer plant, Killer Croc, who has a horror section, and Scarecrow, who has an actually fun section where you're taken to a demented world where you can't get spotted by his killer orange gaze, or he kills you. Oh, and you also fight skeletons. As you've been able to see, most of the battles here are just Titan fights, and that's because the boss segments were a last-minute addition to the game. And you know, they are pretty lackluster most of the time, but that's the game's only blunder. Apart from that, everything in this game is good. The only aspect that really shines high above the rest is the game's atmosphere. Unlike the following games, in Asylum they take full advantage of the fact you're stranded in a creepy, demented madhouse with an already unnerving backstory. The Victorian Gothic halls of the Arkham Mansion, the gigantic, almost Lovecraftian moon, the distant yet close enough screams of the patients at the penitentiary, the supernatural green hues, and the fact that Enigma's cell was supposed to be coated in blood. It's pretty much the suffering in the Batman mythos. It's the closest we'll ever get to a Batman horror game. Which is explainable since at one point this was also meant to be an adaptation of Gotham by Gaslight. The coolest thing Along with some of the Riddler challenges, you can also discover some secrets on the island.
I'm over here stroking my dick. I got lotion on my dick right now.
This game oozes with a supernatural yet grounded feeling that just screams, this place is haunted and it has a horrible omen. Please turn back immediately. This game is a complete landmark. It proved that superhero games could be good. And thanks to things like its combat, we've been able to get some gems, like these games who have been influenced by the combat. And of course, we've also gotten Insomniac Spider-Man games thanks to this one. If it wasn't apparent, I really like this game. This is a Batman fan's dream game. Tons of nod to the comics. From the story being loosely based off the comic, Arkham Asylum, to the Mad Love storyline being weaved into the Harley Quinn tapes. And the fact that some B and C tier villains are riddles. Some might say it's a really good game, but somehow one of the worst in the series, which is objectively wrong because they hold objectively inferior games in higher regard. All these things, they're just opinions. The only thing I know for sure about this game is that it makes you feel like Batman.